So I'll just start a little bit with a reminder, just to highlight where the data has been collected from. Then I'll focus a little bit on the Future OLD Selves data analysis up until now, and give you some results that we think are more interesting. And then, as I said, I'll allow for some question and suggestion moving forward. So I wanted to start a little bit with the MWOS benchmark survey, because that's the data collection in which we embedded this research question. So just to remind you a little bit, it was a data collection that happened last year as part of our benchmarking efforts, which had a more practical reason, in the sense of we wanted to obtain a very wide overview of mature employees in Australia, and obtain some benchmarks for the measures that we are using for the organizational surveys. And we've presented this benchmark survey in a few instances, so I won't insist too much on it. But what I would like to highlight probably is the fact that even though it was a very kind of opportunistic data collection, the structure of the respondents' sample was very close to the structure of the Australian working population as described by the ABS. So this is the overview of the participants, and I also wanted to give you an overview of the measures we used in the data set, because when you think about how we can approach the Future OLD Selves further, it might help you to kind of think of how else we can relate things together. So it was a wide data collection in which we used items reflecting organizational practices, experience reality of the employees themselves, and individual responses. And we also looked at various outcomes that are related to retention and also performance, maintaining performance along the lifespan. And if you're still interested about the more descriptive things, you can always go back to our report, which is online. But today, what I wanted to do is show you how we thought about embedding a research question that was more theoretically driven into this benchmarking data collection, in order to, in a way, enhance opportunities for publication. So in that benchmarking and more descriptive data collection, we embedded theoretically driven research questions around how do people think and represent their late careers, and how these representations actually influence their decisions and attitudes that are relevant to increase participation in the workforce or retirement. So in thinking about this, we actually went back to the literature and adapted existing construct, which was the Future WORK Selves, and we adapted it to refer more to the late career stages, and especially the age around retirement, or when people are expected to make decisions about retirement or continuing in the workforce. Why we did that was because we know that with changing demographics, there is a renewed emphasis on how people approach their career overall over the lifespan, but also late career stages, when they make those decisions about a retirement or not, staying, continuing to work, in what capacity, what type of work, how many hours, and so forth. We also know that the changing nature of employment and retirement have altered how people approach their careers and career management. So we know that with people not longer being expected to stay with an employer for most of their working life, and also with people not retiring in the same ways, so more flexible approaches to retirement, have led to people having to take more individual responsibility for their career trajectories and also for their retirement decisions. So they have a more active role in managing their career, and also ensuring that the way they shape their career and the way they choose to exit from the workforce is actually aligned to their own values, needs, and aspirations. So the wider research especially in organizational behavior has pointed to this kind of changes and highlight the need to better understand how and why individuals form attitudes and expectations about their retirement, and what motivates them to engage in career behaviors which proactively shape their careers to match the needs. In the OB literature, the concept of future work selves was proposed as being a useful concept that helps us understand how people proactively take charge of their careers. By future work selves, we mean an individual representation. So a representation that an individual holds of himself or herself in the future that reflects her hopes and aspirations in relation to work. So this construct was proposed in 2012 by Strauss and colleagues, and they focused on basically how people think and imagine themselves in the future at work. And they showed that the salience, so how clear this representation is and how accessible it is to people, is actually distinct from other important career constructs, such as future focus or other established career concepts. They also show that the salience of these future work selves is related to individuals' proactive career behaviors, and not only cross-sectionally, but also has a lagged effect on proactive career behaviors. They also looked a little bit at the content of these representations, and they showed that the more elaborated these future work selves are, so the more details people give in describing their future work selves, the more aspects they consider when describing themselves in the future, is linked to salience. So they concluded that future work self is a motivational resource for proactive career behaviors. When people have a clear idea of where they want to be in the future at work, they are more motivated to take charge proactively of their career and shape it in the direction that they want to go. So based on this, other researchers have taken the concept on board and have looked at it in different ways. Most of the emerging literature seems to show that this is a very useful construct when thinking about proactive career behaviors, job search, self-efficacy, job search success, career adaptability, career planning, proactive career networking, proactive skill development, and also effective commitment and performance at work. So I think we can all agree that all these factors that were shown to be related with future work selves are actually really important in the context of mature workers and retaining mature workers for longer in work. But in terms of significant gaps, we could see that this construct hasn't been looked at very much or at all actually in the context of mature workers, or hasn't been related to late stages of career. Usually when people are asked to imagine their future work selves, they're instructed to think about in the next 5 years. Even when they are not instructed in a particular timeline, the follow-up questions around how many years in advance they looked at, it's usually around 3 to 7 years in advance. So it focuses more on a near future work self versus a late career future self. It also usually only looks at ideal selves, not so much on more negative selves. And as I said, exploration of this construct in aging, it's not done as far as we know of. Last but not least, most of the of interest seem to be around proactive career behaviors, which is good and they're relevant, but literature isn't actually looking at how they relate with longer term outcomes such as turnover, absenteeism, well-being, and retirement attitudes and behaviors. So in our research, we aim to address that, and we aim to adapt the future work self construct as it is in the literature to the future old self, basically just changing the timing perspective and asking people to focus on or mentally travel to the time where they're going to be around the retirement age or the age where they become eligible to a pension, and to describe what their ideal self looks like. We also, because we had such a big sample, we thought we have an opportunity to actually test some other different types of future work self. So we didn't only use the adaptive future work self measure, which focuses on the life at work. We had a version which asked people to describe their future old selves in general in their life, not linked to work. And we had a version where we looked at feared old selves. So basically, what we do is we ask the employees to, or the respondents to mentally travel into the future when they're nearing the age of 66. Imagine that their life has gone as well as it could, or their working life, and that they have the life that they hoped for at this stage. And after they've done that, we ask them to describe in an open-ended question in as much detail as they can how that ideal self looks like, or ideal old self looks like. And we emphasize that this is a description of the life that they are hoping for, what they ideally imagine their life to be if everything went according to plan. The example there is for our life in general version. In our version focusing on the working life, we just is the same instruction, is just that instead of your life has gone as well as it could, we say your life at work and career has gone as well as it could. And in the working life, feared working life, we ask people to imagine that their work life has not gone according to plans, and that they have the work life that you most worry about at this age, and then describe it. We look at, we have 3 elements of measurement with this task. After people describe that ideal or feared future old self, we have some standardized follow-up items that target the salience of their described future old self, which are items around, I'm very clear about who I want to become at this age, I can easily imagine myself at this age. And we also introduced future old self, fixed or flexible mindset. Things like I can imagine many different positive futures for myself at this age versus people having a very stuck one option image about themselves at this age. And we also look at the narrative descriptions. So what exactly people describe as their ideal future old self. And this is the part that hasn't been explored too much in the existing literature, and is partly due to just the difficulty in dealing with the qualitative data that is generated. But in this project, we are using an computerized text analysis tool, which is called Look, which I'll describe a little bit in the next slide, to extract actually scores for different cognitive and psychological measures that might be contained in the descriptions. So Look is a text analysis application, which is computerized. Its name comes from linguistic inquiry and word count. And it has been proven to be an efficient and effective method for studying the emotional, cognitive, and structural components in basically speech, being it verbal or written. And I gave you a little bit of an overview of what kind of variables Luke is able to extract automatically from a written speech. So we've submitted the open-ended responses of that people gave to our little task, and Luke automatically extracts some summary language variables, such as the overall analytic thinking, authenticity, emotional tone, how many long words people use, how many dictionary words overall. We don't focus too much on these summary language variables because they are developed by Luke based on some algorithms putting together different scores, and we're not really in control of what those how those scores are computed. It also extracts some linguistic dimensions, for example, how much or how often people use the first person singular or the first person plural in their responses. But what is most important for us, it extracts some scores on psychosocial processes such as positive emotion and negative emotion. And the variables in red are the variables that we are focusing on in our analysis. There are also opportunities to get very specific emotions like anxiety, anger, sadness. But unfortunately, these specific emotions don't have a very good a range of scores in our sample, so it's harder to use them individually. They also Luke also provides a score for motivational drives, which we are using. Also scores for future focus, so how many times people will use words like will, may, soon, that denote future focus, and some personal concerns. For example, how much people use words related to work, like job, work, tasks, boss, supervisor, and so on, and how much they use money-related words in their responses. So this is a little bit of an overview of what Luke provides, and in red there are the variables that we are focusing on, mainly because these are the variables that we also have enough data on. And one first step that we did in our analysis was to check whether people are actually able to describe those future old selves, and if they give us some relevant answers, especially when we frame the task differently. In a way, this data gives these results that I have here just gives us a little bit of idea that actually the people have described what we asked them to describe, in a sense. So you can see that we have the Luke scores for different things there, and we just looked here at how they differ across the three different future old selves that we investigated. And the columns that are colored differently denote significant differences. So for example, in the first graph there, you can see that people provided more or were more analytic in the future old selves life and work, but not so much on the negative. But I would probably highlight just the fact that the positive emotion, for example, is much higher in the future old self life and future old self work, because they were ideal future old selves, and less so in the negative form. Also, negative emotions here very reduced in the ideal versions, as we would expect, but very high in the negative future old self again. So also, if we move forward, and I think there is a mistake actually here, how I've color coded this. The first column is future old self life in general. The second column is always future old self at work, and the third column is always the future old self negative. So for example, we can also see that the cognitive processes, people use more words associated with cognitive processes in more specific forms, like the future old self at work and the feared old self at work. They also use more drives here in the work-related forms. They use more work-related words in the work-related form. They use more leisure words in the general life. So all these kind of differences showed us that people actually kind of pay attention to the instructions, and they do think at these different forms of future old selves a little bit differently. So as I said, these were mainly for kind of validation purposes and ensuring that people actually respond to the task that we asked them to respond to. We also looked a little bit at how LUIC scores, so the content scores, relate to the salience and fixed mindset, so the standardized scores at the end. And we can see that there are very there are few and low associations between salience and fixed mindset and the content, which tells us that the content, so the qualitative responses that people give to the task, are somewhat different from the salience and flexible or fixed mindset that we evaluate through the standardized follow-up questions. So then the next steps for us were to were mainly around making sense of the very complex data structure that we have and the many options that we have. And the first thing that we want to decide was which task of the three might be more interesting to explore and focus on in this first stage. And then after making that decision, how does the content of the future old self play a role in understanding some relevant behaviors? If it does matter beyond salience and flexible mindset, and how they all contribute to late career behaviors and attitudes. So in a way, probably I would ask you to keep these questions in mind, because they are questions that we are still grappling with, and you might have very interesting insights into what we could do further. But as a next step, as the first step, we decided to focus on the work-related future of selves. So just the version that is asking people to reflect on their future old selves at work and their ideal work life around the age of 66. Focusing on just this particular form, we investigated whether the characteristics of the future old self, both salience and flexibility or fixed mindset is the reverse of flexibility, as well as the content, relate and are able to predict work behaviors in general and retirement behaviors and attitudes. And in doing so, we actually controlled for gender, age, satisfaction with current finances, and proactive personality, which were all factors that we knew from previous research that might contribute to these outcomes. So I've put them, the predictors in the middle here, and the two types of outcomes on the side. Please note that this is not a mediation analysis. In all the models, we actually looked at the predictors as predictors, and looked at their predictive power with each of those behaviors and attitudes. I just had to put them like this to be able to fit all in a slide. But what this slide is telling us is that future old self salience and flexibility have incremental predictive power, especially on behaviors such as negotiating ideals, proactive performance, and career withdrawal. They also have, and especially the salience, have predictive power over attitudes related to retirement, like retire on time attitude, or retirement planning and desired retirement age. So for example, you can see there that the more salient a future old self is, so the more clear and easy to imagine and elicit, actually the desired retirement age is lower. So people who have a very salient future old self can be expected to retire earlier. There is also, consistent with that, a positive relation with a retire on time attitude and retirement planning. So this tells us a story about the fact that people who have a very clear idea about what they want to do and who they want to be around the age of 65, there are other people who also think very proactively about retirement and kind of plan for it, and most probably will aim to retire on time or even earlier. But the people who have a flexible future old self are the ones that are more likely to be willing to work past retirement age. You can see there a positive but low correlation. In terms of the content of future old self, you can see that the more motivational drives the more words related to motivational drives people use to describe their future old self, so that Luic drives is again positively correlated to working people being willing to work past retirement. The more future focus they are, the more they want to retire on time. And the more money-related words they use, the less they want to retire on time, probably due to the factors associated with financial difficulties. It is consistent with what we know from the literature, but I would remind you that this is on top of controlling for their satisfaction with current finances. In terms of more kind of work generic behaviors, salience is positively correlated with negotiating ideals, proactive performance, and but also career withdrawal. And flexibility is positively correlated with negotiating ideals and proactive performance, and negatively correlated with career withdrawal, which means that the more flexibly people think about their future self, the less likely to withdraw from their career. And Lewick negative emotions, so the content of the future selves, also contribute positively to career withdrawal. So the more negative words, emotion words they use, the more likely they are to withdraw from work. So this is a very broad kind of understanding of how future old selves play a role in career behaviors, work behaviors, and retirement-related attitudes and behaviors. And in a second step of the analysis, and I think this is the last piece of results that I'm showing, we are aiming to focus more on unpacking the relationship with ideals, because we know that these customized employment arrangements that individuals can negotiate with their supervisors or employers can really be really important for mature workers, and they can ensure that flexibility that mature workers need, especially when wider practices related to flexibility are lacking at the kind of organizational level. So we know from the research that these deals can be vital in ensuring ways for mature workers to achieve that matching between their own working needs and values and their jobs. And we know from social exchange theory that if these flexible negotiations are allowed, then it really means that both employees and organizations can maximize their benefits and reduce costs. If mature workers are allowed to negotiate different and more flexible jobs, then they will be more likely to reciprocate by not leaving the organizations, and also contributing to knowledge sharing and maintaining the knowledge and expertise, their knowledge and expertise in the organization. Also, the research is showing that especially flexibility at the individual level, so individual arrangements compared to more practice organization-wide type of flexibility, is important for older mature workers to keep them motivated and productive and healthy in work. And the arguments that literature gives usually is around the fact that older workers benefit more from flexible work arrangements compared to younger employees, and also the fact that mature workers seem to have more heterogeneity in terms of their needs and preferences compared to younger workers. So there is a push in the literature to really look at ideals as a way to ensuring a flexibility at the individual level, and this could be a very important element in ensuring that people stay in work longer, but they also are healthy and productive because they have jobs that fit. So focusing on the ideals, as we saw in the previous slide, we mostly the salience and the flexibility of future selves contributed to this behavior, and not so much the content. So we asked ourselves whether there are some interactions there that we could look at, and indeed we found interesting interactions between the age of the workers and flexibility of their future old selves. And the graph there shows that on average, young workers actually negotiate ideals more often than mature workers. But when we take the flexible future of self in consideration, mature workers that have a flexible future old self, so they think more flexibly around themselves at the age of 66, they match the level of negotiating ideals to the younger ones. And last, we also saw an interaction between the flexibility of future old selves and positive emotions or words related to positive emotions that are used in those descriptions. And we can see there that thinking more positively about their future old selves makes a big difference for people who also have flexible old selves. So the highest level of negotiating ideals happen for people who think flexibly about their future old selves and also more positively about their future old selves. And I think I'm going to leave it to that. I'll wrap it up by saying that first of all, it seems that this construct that we've adapted actually adapts quite well to thinking about possible and future selves in relation to retirement and late career behaviors. It seems that people actually reply according to our instructions, and that the salience and the flexible mindset, as well as the content, helps us understand a little bit about behaviors and attitudes that might be relevant to career management and late career management. And I'll leave it to questions from here.